Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that June realizes she likes Ted, a small, absurd line at first, a kind of private alarm that goes off in her chest whenever he slips through the diner's door. It begins with the ordinary, the bell over the door, the soft clink of his coins as he sets them down, the way he orders the same thing every Tuesday without looking at the menu. People think love arrives as flame and thunder. For June it arrives as ritual, as a slight rearrangement of the day. Ted starts coming in more often, a figure who threads himself into the fabric of the place without demanding the spotlight. He is neither handsome in a movie way nor strikingly flawed, he is simply there, and that is what begins to change everything for her. He takes the corner booth as if it belongs to him. June notices the neatness of his shirt and the slow, methodical way he folds the napkin to his left. He reads while he eats, a small paperback propped up against a salt shaker, and when he looks up he looks like someone trying to remember a line from a play he once loved. There is a sadness at the edges of his mouth, an attention in his eyes that makes June's hands jitter. When he leaves he thanks her, always with the same low, even tone of voice that leaves warmth behind like steam on a winter window. She finds herself polishing a spoon for no reason other than to make an excuse to stand close to the counter where she can watch him walk out. June's life has been a series of small recoveries, public and private. The diner is where she learns to make herself small again on purpose, where she practices being reliable, hot coffee exactly at 8, the ramen ladled with care, a smile that doesn't pretend everything is okay but offers someone something steadier than chaos. Ted becomes a presence that suggests possibility, not because he does anything extraordinary, but because he is steady. He is the steady footfall in a life that had been defined by sudden vanishings and cold rooms. The enormity of her past, the nights her children were left in a car with the heater broken, the long list of apologies she had given herself and others has not gone away. But in the simple cadence of his visits there is a small counterweight, a reason to believe a life can be different in small and measurable ways. She tells Naomi first because Naomi is the kind of friend who sits with her elbows on the counter and says, "So show me," as if June were a painting. Naomi is younger, quick with the kind of optimism that can be taught in community college classes on marketing and self-esteem. She is the one who says, "Give yourself a chance, June," and then, for dramatic effect, demonstrates how to smile with her eyes. Jacob sits a little further back, always half in and half out of the conversation the way people do when they are not sure whether to interfere. Jacob's support is steadier, quieter, little practical tweaks about posture, about softening the tone when something sharp slips out. He tells her that she doesn't need to become someone else. She needs to stop apologizing before anyone asks for it. Their guidance becomes a rehearsal room. Naomi supplies the lines and the risk. Jacob provides the edits and the steady rhythm. The friendships at the diner are small ecosystems. Smitty and Tyrell hover as constant solder, judgmental but oddly affectionate fixtures who measure June with the long memory of people who know what happens when someone walks away from their responsibilities. They are the people who remind her of what she once was and what she still might be. Smitty's voice carries the weight of all the town's gossip. He is the one who will say under his breath, "Don't get too soft, June," that way that makes the words both protection and prison. Tyrell is more practical. He can see that June's life is fragile and that whatever she is reaching toward requires scaffolding. Their doubts are not cruelty, they are the residual distrust of a community that had felt burned. For June, the ache in Smitty's eyes when he looks at her is louder than any cheer Naomi could give. June's internal landscape is a ruined room and a window that sometimes lets in light. Her history is not something she can edit out of her face. The details are precise and terrible, the sounds of a heater shutting off, the blank socket of a child's stare, the promises made and broken. She remembers the arithmetic of survival, how to choose which needs to feed and which to starve, and the decisions were often the wrong ones. Redemption in this town is not a public spectacle. It is a slow accrual of small, honorable acts, showing up to court, answering a phone call, sitting with a child at a school play. It is beating the drum of accountability and not flinching when old hands point and say, "We told you so." So when desire creeps in, It feels like a betrayal not just of others but of the new life she is constructing. Loving again seems at once impossible and the most rational next step. If she cannot trust herself to remain, how can she ever build a consistent life for the two halves of herself? Naomi encourages June to flirt like someone learning a new language. She gives tutorials in the back booth: how to let words be light, how to set down a mug with a particular flourish, how to let your hands rest in view, all tiny signals that say, "I am available," in the small, human way. Jacob teaches her how to soften a phrase when it might otherwise sound like accusation. He runs lines with her at closing, tells her to breathe into vowels, to allow a space for someone else to fill, to ask instead of demand. There is humor in their training, a broken record of dares and laughs and tenderness. This tenderness is not about romance alone. It is about June learning to treat herself gently enough to be trusted. Ted reciprocates in the most non-committal of ways. He notices her, he lingers, he tells a joke that lands crookedly but makes June laugh. He mentions his work in passing, speaks of a house that needs fixing and a woman named Nicole who is complicated, with a tone that suggests history rather than villainy. Little slips in conversation hint that his life is a tangle. He refuses to talk about divorce in concrete terms. He changes the subject when June asks about weekend plans, and once his phone vibrates against the table with a message that makes his face fold into something unreadable. June accepts these fissures as reality. Everyone has them. Still, there is a dim awareness that the man she has imagined in private warmth exists within more complicated circles than the glazed window of the diner lets on. Because June is small and because she has been hurt by being small, she begins to tell herself rules: don't go looking for proof of things you do not want to see, and if something unravels, move backward. Her practical mind builds a hedge around her hope. She will not wear lipstick to work because it draws attention. She will not share her schedule for the weekend. She will not call him. These rules are half prayer and half survival manual. But Naomi argues for risk. How will you know if there's a tomorrow if you always cancel the evening before? And Jacob suggests a diplomatic introduction. June decides to introduce Naomi to the man she likes, thinking it a minor, domestic thing. Naomi will like him, she tells herself, because Naomi likes people who are raw and earnest. When June brings him by the counter and slides a cup of coffee toward him like a calling card, Naomi lights up with the uncontainable delight of a friend who sees possibility and wants to fan it into a flame. She asks Ted about books and pretends to be surprised his favorite is the detective novel that she herself loved at 19. There is laughter, small sparks. It is a moment of relief. The friend network ritual of testing a new affection in safe company. Naomi's cheerfulness makes June loosen her shoulders, and for the first time in months she allows herself to plan something that involves another person. She imagines a real dinner, the kind where you are allowed to be content. They do not yet know who Ted really is. That detail hangs in the air like a curtain that keeps certain truths at bay. Ted does not tell them much, not because he is secretive, but because his life has been catalogued in ways that are messy, and when a wound is messy you do not always thrust the jagged parts into daylight. June knows his name, of course, she has scribbled it on the back of an order pad. Naomi and Jacob accept him as one of the ragtag cast of the diner, a man with a bad toaster at home and a penchant for reading in corners. They don't know the edges of his relationships, the legal filings, the nights he has argued until the dawn with a woman named Nicole, the possessive calls he answers from a woman named Leslie who insists with absurd insistence that history can be rewritten in her favor. When the first hint of complication unfurls, it is small and almost ignorable: a woman standing outside the diner who watches Ted through the glass, her laugh a little too loud, her coat too bright. June notices her because the woman looks at Ted like an owner checks on furniture. There is an intensity in her gaze that hints at possession. Naomi makes a joke about that lady with the sparkly coat and Ted shifts in his seat, offers nothing, and the moment moves on. Naomi still does not see the significance. Jacob shrugs and says it's probably nothing. The world rearranges itself around a 10-minute hush as if nothing true is ever said directly. June begins to feel a small trepidation that sits like a stone in her shoe. Word travels in small towns like smoke. By the time the stone becomes a pebble of fact, Naomi and Jacob have heard a rumor and dismissed it, that Ted is not entirely free, that he has a wife named Nicole who sleeps on the other side of a different life, that there is a woman named Leslie who calls and sometimes shows up where she is not expected. These are not the kinds of things people pronounce loudly without risking ridicule. The rumor becomes a background hum. Naomi thinks it is complicated but nothing to fear. Jacob is more cautious but still curious rather than alarmed. Only Smitty and Tyrell raise practical objections. June, you remember what happened before, Smitty will say. You don't need more tangled cords. June is a gymnast of contradiction. She wants safety and she wants sensation. The arrival of these complications does this not end her enjoyment, but it reframes it with the tautness of a wire strummed before a storm. She starts to listen differently to Ted's laughter. She reads his texts when he puts the phone face down by mistake. She learns that he receives messages at odd hours with single words like where or now. That means something she does not yet understand. She tests herself with a question about Nicole. Ted answers, speaking of old promises and shared history as if those are peas in a bowl he can pick and section. He is not a villain in June's mind. He is simply someone caught in the pull of lives that have grown around him like vines. Leslie is the shape against the glass. Her character is grafted in people's stories and in fragments that arrive like torn letters. She is someone who never accepts loss gracefully, a woman who, when threatened with the abandonment of a child, clung so fiercely that she rewired the situation to her benefit with a mixture of manipulation and violence. In the town's retelling she becomes an archetype, protective, ferocious, capable of doing things that normal people would find monstrous to preserve what she considers hers. That sketch is terrifying in the abstract and terrifying in the concrete because Leslie's actions were never wholly lawful nor entirely immoral in her own mind. She is the kind of person who believes the world owes her the shape she wants, and if the world resists, she will find improvised methods. June deliberates what to do with this knowledge. She could step back, retreat into the small, disciplined life of someone who repairs a mistake with repetition, but she is tired of living in a ledger of wrongs. She wants to be seen simply as someone who has tried, and sometimes failed, to hold together a family. Ted matters to her because he is a steadying principle against the chaos that once defined her days. Loving him is not a moral error, it is, she tells herself, a step toward a life where rebuilding is the point. Yet every community has those watchful citizens who mark your movements and keep a ledger. Smitty and Tyrell are the immediate enforcers of that ledger, and their disapproval is both a social sanction and a fearing off of the unknown. This is where Naomi's optimism and Jacob's measured fixes are crucial. Naomi wants to stage small victories, a dinner out, an open-handed compliment, a photograph taken without the cameras of the past leaning in. Jacob offers tactical support, how to handle confrontation, how to speak with Ted if his personal life encroaches, how to assert without appearing furious or pleading. Their coaching is affection made practical. For June it is permission to try. If she can practice being loved in a room with people who will not flee, she can begin to imagine a longer arc for herself that includes second chances and the right to flirt without sinking into self-sabotage. But there is another part of the town that is less forgiving, the ex-wives who still have the archives of what people once were, the mothers who guard the reputation of children as if they were relics. Nicole's name comes up in snippets, a voicemail accidentally left on by a number Ted never answers in full. A social media photograph where Nicole looks cut from a different cloth, closed-lipped, impossibly composed. June sees a photograph on the phone once, a face smiling in an older, more polished way, and imagines the kind of life that Ted has once had and perhaps lost. She tries to be pragmatic, to accept that grown people have messy pasts, and also feels, irrationally and deeply, that she has stumbled into a triangle while still rebuilding the simplest edges of herself. The diner becomes a place of rehearsals and missteps. June practices saying good morning with a slightly different inflection. She refuses an invitation once because Smitty said something sharp and the old shame blossomed into a Bruce. She goes to bed thinking about a child's voice she can barely remember and about whether anyone would ever call her mother without a past thinness in the word. She lies awake considering the mechanics of entanglement, Leslie's possessiveness, Nicole's cool reserve, and where in the tangle June might fit. Her nights are a detailed map of small hazards. The unnatural calm before a storm is the hardest. Ted continues to come by. He mentions Nicole with the same vagueness as a weather report. We've been sorting through things. He laughs about a story of his and Leslie's past that ends with a half-truth. June smiles and keeps the place where it hurts to herself. Naomi, ever the force, decides that it would be good to accelerate the human timeline by arranging a casual meal. She sees June's hesitation and treats it like a minor ailment. You both deserve a dinner where neither of you is interrupted by the world, she says. Jacob nods as if saying yes will make it so. The plan is to create a normal moment in the rotating carousel of complicated lives, to sit at a table and allow normal conversation to occur. June agrees because the heart tends to do what the head has not planned for. It leans toward light. She knows the risks intellectually but wants, more than anything, to prove to herself that she can sit at a table and be content. The evening approaches with a nervousness that tastes like a copper penny. She chooses a dress the color of a late summer sky, practices speaking without marking every sentence with apology, and goes. The meal begins in the gentle fashion of good intentions, laughter, easy questions, the work of people trying to line up their lives into something coherent. They are almost finished when a car idles at the curb across from the restaurant. Its engine hum is a low, expectant animal. June notices it before she notices anything else, a sense, a peripheral tightening. Ted's hand finds hers across the table without a word, and in that touch there is both solace and a warning. The woman in the sparkly coat from the diner is standing at the corner now, watching the restaurant through its front window with eyes that keen like a hawk. The woman has not made a move yet. She is cold-blooded in the way of someone performing surveillance. June feels the room narrow. The conversation can continue only a little longer. A hush has fallen. It is a slender, dangerous moment, the collision of something fragile, a budding affection, a hope of stability with a force that has shown it will not accept loss without protest. June's stomach knots in a way that is almost physical, but she forces herself to breathe, to keep the plate steady, to say something ordinary about the soup. Ted squeezes her hand once and then pulls away, eyes flicking to the window. Naomi keeps talking, oblivious to the incoming threat. Jacob's jaw hardens in a way June knows by now. Outside, the car's headlights stay low like a sleeping animal waiting to be commanded. The woman in the corner tilts her head, as if listening to a signal only she can hear, and for a moment June tastes the iron of something that might be coming. There are many ways to end this kind of scene. People will choose fights, they will choose flight, they will choose defiant normalcy as a strategy. The diner meanders on, the regulars continue to pay their tabs, and the town offers its usual noise that can either drown out or amplify a crisis. June sits with a plate in front of her, with warm bread half-eaten, with a future that feels at once possible and precarious. She has done what she has not done in a long time, let someone into the small theater of her life. Yet the presence of Leslie's watchful posture and the unreadable involvement of Nicole hover like storm clouds. She cannot help wondering whether the person she has allowed herself to like will be the shelter she hopes for or the trigger that sets loose a whole history of damage. For now, the dinner ends with polite goodbyes and the soft clunk of silverware. Ted says he will call, and Naomi smiles in that bright, trusting way that binds small groups together. As they walk out, Ted glances over his shoulder. The car's hood glints in the streetlight. June feels the electricity of being seen and the terror of being vulnerable at the same time. She has stepped into the possibility of something she never thought she deserved. At the same time, a sense of dread coils in her stomach. She knows, with the stubborn clarity of experience, That small happiness in such a town requires guardrails that are not always within reach. They do not reach for the end at night. The story does not close. The scene leaves things open, like a door left ajar into a hallway whose other rooms are filled with people whose intentions are anything but simple. June walks home with Naomi's advice looping in her head, with Jacob's practical edit swarming her pocket like coins, and with Smitty's caution humming like a radio between stations. The stakes have been raised without a single catastrophe having yet occurred, and in the quiet the possibility of danger seems both plausible and distant. The diner hums behind her, and beyond it the town waits to see whether an ordinary affection can withstand the gravity of other people's histories.